Today's great interview was with my friend Hadar Orkibi. Hadar is from New Zealand, believe it or not, but he invests here in the US. He talks about the differences between investing here in the US and what it's like investing in New Zealand. So Hadar is a great guy. He has a lot of great nuggets in today's interview. So stick around for all of that. Really enjoyed this one. This was a real fun one. As always, like and subscribe on Wrestling with Real Estate, the YouTube channel. Go to the WWRE podcast and give me a 5-star rating and write me a review if you think it's worthy, and of course it is. And I'm looking to speak to as many of you as possible. If you'd love to jump on a 30-minute call with me and talk some more about real estate, there's going to be a link in the description down below, or go to wrestlingwithrealestate.com, the website, and there'll be a link there as well. But yeah, I'd love to connect with you, find out if there's any way whatsoever I can help you, and maybe there's a way you can help me as well. So it'll be a fun conversation, and yeah, sign up. But before all that, stick around for today's phenomenal interview with Hadar.
Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we're joined by Hadar. How's it going, Hadar?
Good, man. How are you? Good to see you, buddy.
I'm very good. Me and Hadar had a great talk for about, 30 minutes about fellow rugby interests and all the good stuff.
Absolutely. It was great.
Yeah. So before we start and dive into the conversation, which I'm really excited to do, I've got 4 questions for you. That's just a bit of fun, and I was wondering what your answers were. So what if you had to be an animal, what animal would you be?
I'd probably think that I might be an elephant.
Okay, because you never forget?
I never forget, and I like India and all of that, so I got a lot of internal thought about that, so maybe elephant would be very nice.
Okay, what's your favorite meal?
My favorite meal is Indian meal. It's a vegetarian Indian meal, although I'm not vegetarian. There is something that's called bindi masala. It's a lady's fingernail / okra, if you know. It's a kind of a curry, which is without sauce, but it's very, very nice. It's my favorite, and we don't have bindi, which is okra, growing in New Zealand. So every time I have it, it's a real treat.
Oh, nice. How did you get into Indian food?
I love India, traveled backpacker there many years ago, and I actually traveled over there a few times and met my wife there. She's not Indian, but she was backpacking there again, and we met there, and on a sleeper bus, actually, on a bus journey, 12-hour bus journey from one place to another, from Goa to Hampi, if anybody knows here. It's in South India. And we hooked up and basically started traveling together, and then the rest is history. But since then, we've been going to India every few years, mainly to Goa and Karnataka, and took the kids over. And we really like the culture. We like a lot of what it has to offer, and we like it. So it's great place to go with that.
Very cool. I love Indian food myself. What's your favorite color?
Blue.
Blue. Okay. And then,
yeah.
If you had to visit any planet, which one would it be?
So that's a good question. I won't be going to Mars or the moon because there's nobody there, and it looks quite plain. But I read a book recently, which is called The Autobiography of a Yogi, and they were talking about a planet that is called Haryana Loka, which is a planet that apparently, Haryana Loka, if I pronounce it right, apparently it has a lot of celestial beings in it, all sorts of angels and all sorts of spiritual masters and various things. So if I were to go to any planet, when you ask me the question, I may as well go over there. There's a lot, sounds more interesting, and we can grow and learn more, opposed to going to Mars. Yeah,
absolutely. It is. Yeah, as opposed to the moon where there's rocks, and Mars where there's sand, where there's not much else going on. Yeah, very cool. Well, thank you for taking part in that. That's always fun to hear people's answers. So before we dive into the conversation, you touched on it a little bit there, but do you want to tell us a little bit more about your background and what your current focus is?
Yes, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Israel, in Tel Aviv. And then I traveled to India. I met my wife, and at some point we moved to New Zealand. But when I was about 15 to 16 years old, I started in Israel. I started working with my brother, in his jewelry shop. He's a jeweler. And I learned to become a jeweler and a goldsmith, if you like, and kind of be a diamond assessor. I went through the courses and got myself certified. And I was working 9 to 5 with him, if you like, as a W-2, even from an early age, 14, 15, 16, after school in the shop. And I got to the point when I kind of felt that it's not suitable for me. I want to be out there. I want to be doing things outside, networking with people, talking to people, doing my own entrepreneurial stuff. So I got my real estate license in Israel, and I became an agent over there for a period of time. Then I went to travel in India, and I met my wife, and she came back with me. Back then, she was my girlfriend. She came back to live in Israel with me, and I was still doing the real estate agent stuff. And we got to the point that we felt that we wanted to start a new start in a place where it's kind of a mutual ground. And Israel was really on a turmoil back then in the early 2000s, a lot of suicide bombers and stuff. So we actually ended up going to New Zealand for a trip to see her sister that was living there, married to a farmer back in the South Island of New Zealand. So we went there, we saw the place, we liked the place, and decided to immigrate there. When we arrived in New Zealand, I wasn't really investing fully in real estate back then. So I was doing a lot of manual labor, a lot of vineyard work and orchard work, picking up fruit, very long hours out in the element all day. And but I decided to start educating myself about real estate. I saw a show on TV about a guy who is a veteran investor who is doing really well, and kind of sparked an interest in me. Early 2000, as you know, also in America and globally, the real estate market really starting to pick up momentum after I believe it was the .com crash in the late 90s. And so what happened was I started educating myself during work. Back then we only had CDs and MP3 players. It wasn't even an iPhones or iPads or anything. And I started educating myself. I started wholesaling. I started getting deals under contract and assigning the contract for a fee. I started doing double closing, what we call contemporaneous settlements, which you, for example, to keep the number easy, get a house under contract for 100 grand, sell it for 150, and you keep the spread in the middle, which is the 50 minus your closing cost, if you like. So I started doing that. Gradually, I picked up some momentum and saved some deposit and started flipping houses, meaning buy, renovate, and sell. And then also in the same time, building a buy and hold portfolio in New Zealand, which is now, after 16 years, consisting of small multifamily and some commercial real estate, mainly a triple net lease, a strip mall. In New Zealand, and I think, back in the UK, it's not so common to have purpose-built apartment community of 100 units, 150, or even 50. So most of my holdings here, they're basically small multifamilies because there's just not available. And at some point, my portfolio appreciated enough and New Zealand market matured to a level that if you buy anything now in Auckland, it's not going to cash flow because you're getting in on a 3 or 4 or even 5 cap if you're lucky, because it became a matured market, a lot of immigration, a lot of population growth, people coming from all over the world to live here and work. So it became a market more like, if you like, London, San Francisco, Boston, LA, Seattle. So basically the cap rates are really, really compressed. So at that point, I decided to look further afield. And as American citizen, my mother was born in Chicago. And I decided to look into the States. I got myself educated. About 4 years ago, I met Jake and Gino, and I joined Jake and Gino, which I'm also now coaching for them, and started gradually building a portfolio in the US. I started small. I started buying a 4-plex, then a triplex, then another 4-plex, and gradually got myself more educated. And now I'm looking at bigger and better deals. and scaling it up. So it's just an evolution of the process.
Yeah, what a fascinating story. There's a lot of stuff I'm interested to ask you about. To start off with, what was it like growing up in Tel Aviv? What are the big differences you may see there from the US and from the New Zealand in terms of lifestyle and how things work there?
When I grew up in Tel Aviv in the late 70s, early 80s, it was much less populated than it is today. Where it wasn't as much traffic, it wasn't as much buildings everywhere. Now, when I go for a visit, every place that back then I thought was a municipality, if you like, or the city council's greenfield, like a park, suddenly, apparently it was a private land or some deal was made and there is, 4 or 5 story or even higher buildings on it. So it became very populated. But when I was a kid, I really enjoyed living over there. It was very safe. It was rider bikes, which was about, let's say, 5Ks or whatever is in miles, I'm not sure. We used to take the bike and just go to the beach and really enjoyed living there as a kid. It was more like suburban. So Tel Aviv is growing up like you do with those cities. So I really enjoyed living there. The prices of the real estate in Israel is very, very high. It's just if you think about it, it's a very small piece of area which a lot of people living over there. So it's high, if you compare it to Singapore or those countries which are kind of landlocked. So real estate prices are very high and the yields are very, very low. So I grew up there. My dad was he's got a bit of a portfolio in Israel. And he was buying them one at a time, no mortgages, kind of like old school. And as a kid, I used to go with him and help him out painting, help him out doing some work on those apartments, mainly apartments over there. There's not a lot of houses. Houses are in Tel Aviv, they're very sought after, very expensive because of the land. So, many apartments like condos, if you like, in the US. And it was, as a kid growing up there was great.
Cool. And then you started as a real estate after working, excuse me, in your brother's jewelry shop. You became a real estate agent there?
Yes. So I went traveling to India a couple of times and in the East, in Thailand and various other places. And then I decided that I want to be, doing real estate maybe in some way, but just going out there driving and trying to broker deals. So I went, set the test of the Ministry of Justice and I passed. And I got a license and I started doing some renting apartments as well. When the rents are about $3,000 or $4,000 rent and you get 1 month rent, so you can make one rent and you get for example, 2,000-3,000. So it was okay, it was good. But then I went traveling again and I met my wife now, and Israel was really kicking off with a lot of unrest. And when we came back, we just felt that you're driving your car in Tel Aviv, and when there's suicide bombers later down the road or something, and we as people who grew up in this environment, you kind of get toughened up for it. You desensitize for those things. But when somebody is coming from for example the UK or Wales or New Zealand or places where it's very peaceful and there is a lot of political unrest or even suicide bombers and stuff like that, like some people have in Northern Ireland back in the day. So it's very stressful, and it's not an environment when we felt as a couple that we want to bring up children to the world. So we went traveling in New Zealand. We liked the place, we liked the people. We ended up buying about 10-acre property here with a lot of land and space, and we have animals. And my wife grew up on a farm, so she likes to have the space and the animals, and it's a never-ending story with the pets we keep. Whether it's a sheep, rabbit, the number of dogs, or you name it, chickens. So it's a lifestyle, and it was always tough for me because we settled down in a semi-rural area, if you like, and I always had to make it happen and invest remotely. So in a way, I really got used to putting teams together, traveling, remote managing project, really working on those relationships remotely. Back then, there wasn't even Zoom calls or anything like that. We did everything on the phone. And that's why going to invest in the US or even out of my areas is something that I just had to do. And shifting from investing in New Zealand to invest in the US wasn't actually as difficult as it is, because I was already investing remotely. It's just meaning instead of flying for 2 hours from where I live to Christchurch, for example, or to Auckland, a little bit far, so I fly for 14 hours, you know? So it costs more, but you know, the rewards are better now that we wanted to build a cash flow business with multifamily. So the adjustment wasn't as hard for me. People, you know, a lot of people really overwhelmed by how I'm doing it and how I'm achieving it. But for me, it was just circumstances that I had to adapt and build system and make it happen, because that's what I decided that I wanted to do. And I felt passionate about it as the time grew. Real estate, it's a great thing, gives you a lot of freedom if you get it right. And it's very satisfying as well. You know, a lot of us have not just the gratitude, the gratification of closing a deal, and you know, you can make money out of it, build equity and create cash flow, but we enjoy the negotiation, we enjoy the chase, we enjoy the relationship that you build along the way. And it's just a great, if you like, profession to be in.
Yeah. And I think what you touched on there as well, people are always scared to invest out of state, and I get it. And people always say that you should invest where you live to start off with, right? But I also think there's a benefit to investing out of state to start off with, because you learn those skills, like you said. And once you've learned those skills, how to invest out of state, that gives you so much more freedom, right? You can pick a market. If there's a certain market that you want to invest in, if you've never invested out of state before and you've always invested locally, well, it's harder for you to understand the processes and build the systems, like you said. But if that's how you start investing somewhere else, well, it gives you that freedom then that you can go anywhere. Right? If you wanted to invest in the UK, it wouldn't be that much different, right? It's just you have that systems in place and that mentality as well to do it. So I think that's really great that you started out like that.
That's exactly right, Barry. And you mentioned a point which I just briefly want to touch on, and it's the mentality, it's mindset. You see, because everything in life and in real estate starts with the mind and start with the mindset. Because if you don't have the right mindset, you're not going to be able to pursue your dreams. You're not going to have a strong why, and you're not going to have the ability to grit, you know, to hang on there when things are tough and there's no deal flow, or you think that you're not picking up momentum. But if your mindset is right, which there are ways to work on your mindset, you know, one of them is surrounding yourself with like-minded people, like we do here, like we do in the MIH Mastermind, and like you do on online forums like Bigger Pockets. It's very, very important. So surrounding yourself with like-minded people and getting the support that you need, and not exposing yourself to too much negativities and things that are draining you down in terms of where you want to go and the path you want to take towards living lifestyle by design, which is what we accomplished through real estate. You have to surround yourself with the right people to have the right mindset for you to be able to pursue it. The next quick point I wanted to touch on this is that if anybody really wants to dive in and really learn about how I've done it, I do have a course, which is a free course on the mihmastermind.com website. There's an education tab over there. If you click on that, you will see the course, which is a video course and an ebook about how to make it happen investing out of area. And I go through more than an hour of presentation and tricks of the business, how to do it. In the beginning, it all comes down to relationship building. So you need to have teams on the ground, and I teach how to do it. I need what to look for in the market and how to really build your team and monitor the market and a lot of things within the course. So I highly recommend it. It's a free course on the MIH Mastermind website.
Wow, how cool. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone should check that out. I'll put a link in the description below. That's a phenomenal offer, you know, to have it for free and to have that information. And obviously you know how to do it and you've done it. So, you know, you're the perfect person to speak to that. So I think that's really cool. Excuse Excuse me. So let's dive into maybe your first investment. So you've moved to New Zealand. You have your first property there. What was the first investment property you bought in New Zealand?
The first investment in New Zealand was actually a house.
Okay.
It was a house. So I've done some. So remember, I was wholesaling a lot in the beginning, and part of my wholesaling was trying to find deals. So I was doing a lot of guerrilla marketing, if you like. I was doing a lot of mailers, flyers, newspaper advertising back then. And that's how I used to get deal flow. And by the way, I'm applying my wholesaler strategy now in the States. I'm doing a lot of direct mail marketing, cold calling, and it does generate lead. My latest deal, 45 units, which is a great off-market opportunity that we closed on late last year. Still repositioning it now. It's looking really mint. It's 100% occupancy now. So that came out from off market through direct marketing and that. So I had a guy in New Zealand that responded to my ads in the paper. A cash buyer coming to town because I came from where I was, looking to buy in this area, specific area. I was targeting a specific area back then. I was targeting an area that had large sections. And there's a reason why I'm saying that. The large section, let's say 1/4 acres, in specific zoning that allows you to develop the site. So it's a multiple unit sites. Because I read in a book from an Australian author, which was highly regarded, that those sites are highly appreciated. They're going to appreciate a lot because you're able to build multiple units on them. And it makes sense, generally speaking. If you live in Melbourne, if you live in Auckland, if you live in those big cities, that there is a lot of demand. So that's why I targeted. Note, I did not think about buying apartments or multiple doors, which there were 3, 4, 5, 7. So that's what I read in the book, and that's why I targeted. So I ended up buying this piece of section, if you like, one house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, on a big lot. And that's it. He rang me, we closed the deal, and I bought it. And then I bought from the same way I started working on broker relationship. I already had credibility. I bought my first house. And then I bought another one in one street down from an agent, from a broker. And I had 2 houses. And now I got to the point that I bought 2 houses, but still, I think I bought them for about $250. And one I bought for $300, and the rent was it's a weekly rents over there. The rents were about $250,000. One was $300,000. Look at the prices for a house. It's 1960s house, just very expensive. And the rent was like something like $1,500 a month. $1,500. So the yields was really low. So I got to the point when I was leverage locked. Basically, I didn't know that I'm better off back then buying multiple income properties. I was educating myself, but I wasn't really enough educated to understand that if you want to grow a portfolio, you need to have a portfolio that generates enough income so you can actually keep borrow money and keep grow your portfolio. And I was leverage locked. I cannot borrow any money. So at some point, I sold one of those houses, took the money, and I started buying small multifamilies, and the rest is history. I rolled into other deals and bigger deals, and ended up being strip mall and buying another fourplex, which I've done a condo conversion, and then sold it up and make a big chunk of money and paid a lot of taxes, but big chunk of money, and paid down debt on one of my commercial assets, which is in 2015, which is now unencumbered. There's no mortgage on it, and it's generating a very nice income, passive income, because there is no debt on it. And that was part of the evolution of my investing.
Wow, very cool. I'm always interested when people invest in other countries to how it compares to the US market, right? I'm not really that well versed even in the UK market, because when I was living there, I wasn't investing, I wasn't paying attention to that whatsoever. But obviously now I'm paying attention to the US market, and I kind of know how things work here. Is there a lot of differences in how things work in the New Zealand real estate market, or is it kind of similar?
You mean in terms of how you make the deals, or in
Yeah,
terms of
how you make the deals, how the deals happen, in terms of leverage, in terms of financing, in terms of everything really, in terms of how you find, how you
okay?
work with agents. Yeah.
Yes. So you work with agent. There are a few differences. So the first difference is obviously the price to rent ratio, which we touched on it. Like we said, most of New Zealand, the price to rent ratios are not great at all. I mean, you're talking 3, 4 cap, 5 cap. It's not like in America, you have Boston, LA, and you also have like other places in Oklahoma, in Cincinnati, in Arkansas, in any other state that has a better price to rent ratio, and you can cash flow well. Florida, some parts. So that's the first thing. And there is still a lot of population. So in the state, those places, you'll have a million people in the MSA, like Kansas City, and you can still find cash flowing properties. So that's a big difference. In New Zealand, when you got big MSA or big cities, there's just no price to rent ratios that cash flow. So that's the biggest problem. The second thing is the lending environment. In New Zealand, the 4 or 5 main banks, they're actually Australian owned. And there's gone are the days that you can go into the bank and talk to the bank manager or your commercial business clerk, if you like, that deals with you in the bank, and he can sign on the loan and approve you for a loan or anything like that. Now everything needs to go to head office, so underwriting deals in a totally different. They don't know you for a bar of soap, as we say, and you really need to. They really need to scrutinize you, and they take your financials, and there's no regard to any of your experience. There's no regard to relationship. There's no regard to nothing. In America, once you have those community banks relationship with local banks, it's relatively easy to get a loan if you got some track records with them. It's a whole different story. I mean, if you're broke and you got no money, it's a different story. But if you got a track record and you're generating some income, you got a business and you know what you're doing and you got credibility, the chances to lend you money is very, very high. Mm-hmm. And that's why we also, I also teach in my course, very important tip here is that if you're looking to invest in a different market, the first thing you want to do once you vetted the market, once you research the market, is to go in and stabilize those relationships with local professionals from the industry, which one of them should be a local community bank and a mortgage broker. But with a local community banks, you want to go and open a bank account with them. You want to open a bank account, even you put $1,000, start the relationship, get a credit card for $500 or $400, and spend $10 a month so you can start building your credit with them as well. They see you're paying your bill. It doesn't matter if it's $10 only out of the 400, but you are a client, you're doing transactions, they see that you are action, doing things and you're paying your bills. So very, very important to stabilize those community banks early on. In New Zealand, recently, about 4 years ago, in 2016, they decided that they want to cool the market with the micro-prudential tools, they call it. So what they did, they adjusted the loan to value for investment property to 60%. Meaning if you want to buy investment property, you need to bring 40% down. In Auckland, the median house price back then was about eight or 900,000. So, you need to bring down 300 or so or more to buy an asset over there. And now they've upped it up to 70 for investment property, but they're not making it easier. The banks are really, really tight. They did weather the storm really well in the global financial crisis because their balance sheets are so good. But it's tight to do business, because they want you to bring a lot of money in terms of down payment, and they are looking at your income. For example, if you're buying a rental property, they will look and they'll account for only 70% of the rent that comes in. So they'll take at least 30% out, and they're not going to look at the whole picture, even if you're cross-collateralizing the property with another one. It's just really, really tough. It's not like in the US. So those are the main two things. It's the price to rent ratios, the banking, and of course there is the lingo that you need to learn and adjust. But the rest is not so difficult. We have the same things: due diligence time frame, and inspection time frame when you go under contract and bits and pieces like that. Earnest money is not so common here. For example, in New Zealand, earnest money is not common. Termite policies and all that, there's nothing like that. Title insurance there's nothing like that either. But that's just part of doing business. That's not a big deal. But there are differences, but it's not that hard to adjust. You just have to educate yourself.
Yeah, that's really interesting though. I always, when anyone's from another country and has invested in another country, I'm always interested to hear the differences, right? And I think usually what it comes down to is that the US is one of the best countries in the world, I think, to invest in real estate, right? Because of the leverage you get, because of the opportunities that there is, the cash flow, the chance to make appreciation, all that I think makes it a phenomenal place to invest.
Two more things which I don't want to forget because they're very important.
Yeah.
The first thing which always struck me, which I couldn't believe, was, you know how in the States where you buy an asset and you want to transfer it from one company to another, or from your name, you want to quick claim deed it to an LLC or something. Mm-hmm. In America, you can do it. In New Zealand, if you change ownership, it's triggered as a sale. Mm-hmm. So if I want, there's no such thing as quick claim deed or anything like that. If you transfer, and you can, the solicitor, the lawyers, the attorneys, they can transfer the ownership. It's online. It's like an e-dealing system. They have an access to the registrar, so they can do it for you. But it will trigger a sale as far as the Inland Revenue will see it, and they'll basically investigate to see if it's a taxable transaction, because you basically transfer. So there's no such, you can't do it. People don't do it. That's number one. Number two, very important. About a few years ago, again, they tried to cool the market. They really eliminated depreciation. So in New Zealand, there is some depreciation on commercial building that you're allowed to take, but there is not much depreciation. When you're generating income from a property, the depreciation is set on 0%. So basically you're unable to offset any of your other income or even your passive income through depreciation allowance. So there's not a lot of tax benefits in New Zealand to offset losses. There's not a lot of investing in energy or in oil and gas and get tax credit and all those incentives. There's not a lot of incentives in New Zealand to as a general within the tax system, the tax laws.
Yeah, thanks for pointing those out there. It's fascinating to me, just the differences between this. And you also make a great point there, going back to it about, you were saying about building relationships with community banks. So it's one, going in there and meeting whoever the banker is or the lender is, or the few of them, right? Maybe even taking them for lunch, whatever it is, and making that personal connection, right? So they know a face and they know your personality and they know who you are. But also opening an account, that is such a brilliant but easy piece of advice that anyone could do, right? You open an account, you put some money in there, and then you also spend some money in that account, and it helps them, right? Because when they have money in accounts, they can lend that money out, and they also, when they see the transactions as well, it just kind of helps build that relationship, so that they'll want to lend you and they'll give you better terms as well. I think that's a brilliant piece of advice for anyone looking to invest anywhere, even in wherever you live as well. So then you went from investing in New Zealand to investing in the US, right? You said that your mum was originally from Chicago, so you're a qualified US citizen, right? So which means it makes it a lot easier for you to invest in the US. When you made that decision, how did you then decide on a market, and which markets did you decide on? Because, hey, I'm going to the US. US is a big place, right? Did you just throw a dart at the map, or how did you pick a place?
Yes, so I'll take a quick step back just to there are some metrics that we look for, and I would like to cover them, for your audience.
Okay, yeah.
But the first thing that happened was that I had some mates of mine in New Zealand already started investing in houses in Memphis and in Atlanta and various places. They bought turnkey, and they're not American citizens, so they're Kiwis, And I went there and I did some market research, and I went to Memphis. I drove for dollar, met with the brokers and agents, and looked into the single housing turnkey model. Quickly realized that for me, first of all, they were borrowing money with the hard money. They were bringing some money from New Zealand and they're doing some hard money over there. So they bring 40% and borrow the 60% for hard money in the States through the turnkey provider could hook them up with someone. All good for them. For me, back then, I am an American citizen, but I wasn't able to borrow money in America. That was in 2008. Think about it, if I could have gone in by then. But I wasn't educated enough and I was doing great in New Zealand, wholesaling, flipping, building my own portfolio. So I went to the States, I had a look, and then I decided that it's not for me because I wasn't able to borrow money because I didn't have a track record over there. So I opened a bank account with Wells Fargo and did the trick that I mentioned before. I didn't have a relationship with community banks. I did have some relationship from families with Wells Fargo, so it was relatively easy to open a bank account with them. So I opened an account with them and started building my track record with my FICO score. And then I went back to New Zealand, kept doing what I'm doing. Meanwhile, I kept in touch with my buddies, in New Zealand who was doing the US stuff and they were doing good. And I did another trip to Memphis a few years after that, quite a few years after that. And I quickly discovered that possibly Memphis was too hot. I found it being very competitive. I found it being street by street kind of neighborhoods that you can go 2 or 3 blocks to one side to the west and it's going to be rough, or if you take the wrong turn off one road, left side will be rough, right side, the east will be good. And I just felt that it's too competitive and it's too hard to grip. So I drove to Little Rock, Arkansas, which is 2.5 hour drive. Another buddy of mine told me that it could be a good market. He heard about it and it could be an opportunity. And I got there and I drove the place and I met with some property managers and other investors, which I met on Bigger Pockets. I reached out to people on Bigger Pockets and I started networking over there and I really liked the place. So the rest is history. I made good friends over there. I got to know the market like the back of my hand. And I built some teams on the ground. And, one of the important part is to really being able to visit the market regularly. So if you want to be investing in one market, whether you're in the States or out of the States, you need to be willing to visit the market regularly. If you're in America, you should be visiting once a month, especially in the beginning, once you build your team. You really want to build your A team. You want to build your A team, which is, you're talking about people who you can leverage their expertise of local knowledge and connections. So whether it's a property manager, lenders, handymans, other investors, you want to attend the local multifamily or REIAs, even as a guest, just to get to know the players, get referrals. Referrals is the #1 source to get good introductions for your team member. So that's something you have to be committed. Once you build your team, it's okay to come, every 3 months or every 2 months or every time you get some lead coming or something like that. But you need to be present. You need to be present in the market. If you're not present, nobody will think of you. Nobody will you're not going to get deal flow, if you like. So it's very important to be present. We are even me, I'm traveling to the States now at least 3 times a year or even 4 times a year. If there is a project, I go and I stay there for a month even. I rent Airbnb or stay with my buddy Cole, which we met through like that. Through just Bigger Pockets led to another guy, my friend Paul Thompson, and he led to Cole. And Cole and I are doing a lot of things together now. We do some, I help him to do wholesaling and we do some bits and pieces and puts on the ground and apartment investing and, so it's all about relationship. You really need to embrace yourself in the market and become local. Everybody there sees me as local now because I know the market. I know the players in the market. I through doing the market research, driving for dollar, building a list to do some marketing, I got to know who owns what. Certain owners, certain landlords, they own hundreds of units, privately over the years. I got relationships with them now. So you really need to reach out and become local. What we are searching for the most part when you're looking for a market is job growth and population growth, steady economy and price to rent ratio. This is very important. Now, the job growth in let's say in Arkansas is not going to be as strong as in Dallas, Texas, for example, or in Texas as a whole. It's just not going to happen. But if you got most of the fundamentals right, you are you know that you're on the right place, because a place where it's really booming, like Jacksonville, Florida, Dallas, Texas, you know, Denver, Colorado, those places, the price to rent ratio and the yields are going to compress, and the price to rent ratio is not going to be there for cash flow for what I'm looking for. If I'm looking for appreciation, I can stay in New Zealand. I don't need to come to the States. I'm looking to buy assets which generate cash flow, assets that we can buy for a price when we can force appreciation, something with mismanagement, a lot of loss to lease, which is under rented, even vacancies. We're looking for value add assets, you know, up to about 150 units. And that's what we do. So we take those assets, we stabilize them, we manufacture equity. So we manufacture the equity, and at the same time, we have an asset which is generating cash flow. It's like buying a failing business. You're buying the business, you're improving the business, and then it's performing. You do the job once, and it pays you forever. That's the key. You have to do a good job. So we like to see job growth of about 2% for consecutive 2 years. We like to see an unemployment rate of 5%, below 5%. Up to before COVID, we had an unemployment rate almost around the nation, the US, of 3.6%. Now it's higher in some places, 8, 7, even 10%. You know, I don't think we're going to come to 30%. You know, we'll see what 2021 will bring. But you know, I think some people scaremongered in the beginning of the COVID. You know, earlier in the year. But back in 2010, the average unemployment rate, you know, when we were just getting out of the GFC or starting to get, when it was right there, it was around 9%, the unemployment, 9.9% in 2009, and in the Great Recession. The lowest unemployment rate in the US that I find and saw was in 1944, about 1.2%. That's the lowest. So, you know, you have to keep things in proportion. Up to COVID, we were doing pretty well. We were around 3.6%. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for areas where there is a lot of big box moving in, you know, a lot of maybe Amazon under the radar, or maybe you can see some development, gentrification, maybe a Best Buy, maybe different kind of employment growth. They're moving in to have people walking, you know, within the place. Very important to see that, because that means that it's going to attract people to work there. Another thing that I look for in a market is I like to see income of minimum 50,000, and that's really, really important, because you want to have people who can afford to rent, but maybe they can't afford to buy. So you got a sweet spot there of potential residents, which we like to call, we like the workforce housing, blue collar workforce housing, you know, people who work in big companies, nurses, teachers, police officers, all first responders. They are the best now because they get to work as well. So that's really, really good. And again, you know, those are the main metrics that we are looking for on a nutshell.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a lot of great information there. That's what you looked for when you initially was coming over here, or is this something you've learned since?
No, that's kind of what we developed as you go. You know, I mean, I did look for that. I fell on my market just because somebody referred me, told me go and check it out. So I went there, and then I started looking into all of that because I got myself educated. See, it's just things that I've researched. You know, when I started in the US 4 or 5 years ago, also through Jake and Gino, and through doing my own research, because I'm kind of did a lot of research before I came on Bigger Pockets and talking to and reading other blogs, you know, what to look for in a market. So how to choose a market. So through experience, through education, through seeing what works and what not in terms of residents now within our communities, to see who's paying, who's not paying, who is in good demand, and finding out different secrets, like calling your chamber of commerce and asking, hey, do you know of any other companies that coming into the area that are planning to open shop in this market or sub-market? and they say that they know, Chamber of Commerce are great source of information. They involve with under the scenes, if you like, trying to put businesses into towns, into local economies. So it's very, very important to communicate with Chamber of Commerce and people who belong to business organizations, local business groups, and alike.
Yeah, very true, because you want to know what's going on in that area, right? You want to know, is it changing for the better? Is it getting, is it improving? Like you said, mentioned that word gentrification, you want to know all this stuff. So now you decided on Arkansas. What does your portfolio look like, and what do you own here in the US? What does your US portfolio look like?
So at this point, like I said, I started earlier. I bought I bought fourplex, triplex, then another fourplex, which I actually just sold now. Long story about that. But then I bought another 45 units on my own, self-funding everything, which was a heavy value add, 30% vacancy, economic vacancy, which if anybody knows what's the difference between economic and physical vacancy, meaning that, for example, if you have a property which is 100% full occupied, but you have, for example, 5% people not paying, so the 5% is regarded as economic vacancy because they're not paying. But in that case, I think we were like 20% vacant, another 10% economic, which means that 10% did not pay. So I went through with my team, spent time there over a month, through the repositioning, the renovation, project managing, and really, really stabilize this asset now at 100% occupancy. We doubled the rent. Again, I'm saying we because I see it as a teamwork. Real estate is a teamwork, whether it's from my property manager, which I'm asset managing, to my handyman Eddie, who's doing a lot of the work there and helping me out with a lot of things, and to all the contractors that I work with. So that's fully stabilized, and now we have another 20-lot mobile home park in Nashville, Tennessee, under contract. We're going to close on it next month. We're just waiting for some surveys to come out. Okay. So yeah, close to, I guess it's close to 80 units or so, self-funded so far, and through the MIH Mastermind, which I run with Marco Barbaro, also Gino's brother. We do the MIH Mastermind, which is pretty much we teach people who wants to transition from single family to multifamily how to make it happen. I mean, I got my own track record and my own portfolio and 20 years experience, but Marco has been in real estate also for 25 years, and he owns with Jake and Gino, close to 2,000 units. So together we help people to achieve their financial goals, but also be part of an ecosystem of deal finders and deal sponsors, if you like, to put deals together and research market and take those opportunities together, because we're looking to buy more assets, especially if there are opportunities. Some larger assets like 150 units or 200 units, it's difficult for one person to buy on their own. So you really need to create some kind of a partnership or a joint venture to take those deals down. And through the masterminds, through our friends and relationship, we have people who's got some liquid cash, whether they sold some shares or liquidated some houses, and looking to invest into multifamily. So together we are going to take some larger opportunities down when they come along. But we underwrite very conservatively those days. These days, we are not jumping in on any opportunity that comes along. It needs to stack up.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. What when you say you're underwriting differently these days, what are you underwriting differently? What is different that you guys are doing right now?
So right now, when we got COVID, there's a lot of metrics that we do, but with the portfolio that I already hold, I'm focusing on tenant, on resident, if you like, retention. Mm-hmm. So the most important thing is to retain the occupancy that you have. So it's really a matter of being there for the residents, answering maintenance requests on a timely manner, and not really going into hard capital expenditures right now, because you need to be smart with your reserves and where the money goes to. But in saying that, I was lucky with the way my project timing went, and perhaps having a good team on the ground and being able to be there for a long period of time and really managing it strongly. So it's stabilized now. So now I just need to take care of whoever's there, and in the new year we'll see what we're going to do. But when we're underwriting properties now, we basically as well, we don't predict any rent growth for the next 12 to 18 months at least. So we even stress tested with, if you like, 5% rent decrease. We're just playing with the metrics. It's mix and match. It's playing with the metrics. We allow for higher economic vacancy. So if there are more delinquencies, people are not paying, for example, we're allowing for that. We always like to play for year one, even 20% economic vacancy, and maybe even year two, we check how it would look like if there is no increase and there's 25% vacancy, economic vacancy, because nobody knows what's going to happen with this COVID thing. It's not going away just yet. The other thing we like to see is the margin, which the margin is, it means what is your break-even point. So let's say, for example, your property is generating certain income. What happens if your property is, for example, 20% vacant or economic vacancy, if there's less rent coming in, how much could it go down by before you are breaking even, before you need to bring money from your pocket to prop up the operating expenses? So we like to see a minimum 30% margin in year one. We look into it in year two. And we also look at it in year 5 or 6, because once we stabilize an asset and we got to the point that it's performing to where we can take the property to, like I said, I'm looking for deals where the loss to lease, if you like, the market rents is below, it's 15% below market rent. So you can increase the rent, whether from renovation or whether through just because it's mom and pop owner and they never increase the rents because there's no mortgage on the property and they don't care. And they're emotionally involved with some residents. So even if we increase the rent to where we want to be, to the target market, over there, we're also going to check the margin, how it's performing, if there is suddenly an unforeseen event. And also we're going to check it out on 100% financing, because at year 5 or 6, or even earlier, now I'm going to refi my property, it hasn't been even a year, how it would look on 100% financing. So how it would look with everything I put into the deal, if I convert that in, because I have to put some down payment to get a construction loan and the way the deal was structured, how it would look on 100% financing. Because when you refi and roll your money out, you basically pulled all your money out of the deal, and now there's a line base which is 100% financing. So we need to make sure that the property is still cash flowing really, really well, even on 100% financing after it's stabilized. So that's not going to happen to refi if the asset is not stable. You need to get it stable, and you need to get to your target rent, and then you can you have a higher appraisal, so you can go and refinance the property 70% of, for example, of the new appraised value. So in effect, you can scoop all your money out, and it's still going to be chunk 30% of equity to the lender, because you increase the value by forcing appreciation. So these are the main thing that I look at. But we also look at amortization. So we stress test by looking into 15 years amortization, 20 years amortization, 25 years, and 30 years. Typically, the 15 years will be on an older asset. If you're buying an asset which is 1960s, when you're doing your preliminary underwriting, you want to have a discussion with your lender before that to see what kind of loan terms you can get. And you want to talk to at least 1 or 2 or 3 loan lenders, and even a mortgage broker, to see what you can get. Because some 1960s asset, until you stabilize the asset, they're not going to give you 25 years or even 20 years amortization. They will give you only 15% because of the age, the vintage of the asset. So we stress test with those different amortization. We don't assume, we have students in the mastermind that, for example, underwrite the deal for the first time, and they put 30-year amortization, while community banks with 80% loan. So, they don't know that community banks are not going to give you 30 years up of the curve, and they're not going to give you off the shelf 80% loan. So it's very important to know that for 30% amortization typically will come if you're going agency debt. If you're going with Freddie and Fannie, once the asset stabilized, typically at least 2 years down the track, when you can refi 70 to 75% of the value of the new appraised value of the asset. So for that reason as well, I'd like to mention we created the ultimate real estate multifamily underwriting course, which is a module of videos and quizzes and some documents that comes with it. And it's for sale if anybody is interested on the MIH Mastermind website, mihmastermind.com. And it's also, for example, we did it for the Mastermind members to get that for free, so we can they get it for free to bring them up to speed with underwriting. Because if you don't know the numbers, you're uneducated, you can't make an informed decision. You have to understand how to read the numbers with multifamily. The last point that I would like to mention right now, let's say 2 points actually, will be the interest and principal terms. So when we buy an asset, maybe in the first year or two, if it's distressed, you'll be able to receive interest only for 1 year or 2 years. But maybe not maybe, for sure, typically from year 2, 3, or 4, it will convert to principal and interest. So you want to see how is that affecting the asset. You also want to see if you're taking a 3 years locked balloon, which means that for 3 years you need to pay the loan, or the loan goes from fixed rate to a floating rate. You want to see what will happen if interest rates goes up from, for example, today 3.8 or 4% to 5.5 to 6 or even more. It wasn't that long enough since interest rates were 6% or even 7%. I mean, it looks not long enough. I remember when I bought this first property I mentioned earlier in 2000 and early 2000s, and I remember doing another transaction in 2008 in New Zealand. Interest rates were 8 to 7 to some 9%. So I remember that really well. So we like to stress test to see what will happen if on higher interest rate. Another point is exit cap rate. So when you get to the point where the asset is stabilized, you are wanting to do two things: refinance the property, which we talked about before, or sell. Our model, my personal model, I'm a generational wealth builder. I'm not looking to be transactional. I'm still flipping houses in New Zealand with my team here. And I'm kind of not looking to be transactional. I'm not looking to buy a multifamily, stabilize it, sell, make some money, and then not have any cash flow. I'm about building cash flows machine to the long term, passive income. So we want to make sure that when we stabilize the asset, it will appraise enough so we can refi. Or if you want to sell, then you know that you're able to sell it for the price that you projected. So we like to see, we stress test it by 1 or 2 points above, typically 1.5 at the worst. So let's say you get into an asset and the market cap rate when you buy it, it's 6%. So we want to see if happen in year 5 or 4 or whatever, when it's ready, what would it be with the income you generated if the cap rates is expanded to like higher cap rate, like let's say 7, from 6 to 7, or 6.5 to 7, 7.5. And then we want to see if there is really an opportunity to implement the exit strategy. And that's how we do. Like I said, it's mix and matching different scenarios. And that's the secret of underwriting. One thing to mention, guys, is that it's very important, is that a lot of people don't talk about it, is taxes. In some jurisdictions, when you buy a property, especially I know that it's in Texas, for example, or I know that it's like that, and specifically in the Dallas metro area, if you buy a property and the transaction is recorded with the tax assessor, your taxes could significantly increase in the next year or even 6 months, or what depends on when you are buying it within the taxing cycle, which will significantly affect your net operating income if your taxes is going up significantly. So you really need to check that and do research. We teach that in the underwriting course, how to research to make sure that what will be your property tax implication, where is it going, what's going to happen after you close on the deal, because you have to know what's going to happen with the taxes, what will be that number moving forward. Otherwise, it could really reduce your net operating income. So very important part. You don't want to get caught without knowing what's going to happen with your taxes.
Yeah, so true. You don't want to think that what the current owner is currently paying for the taxes is what you're going to pay, because in some cases, a lot of cases, it can double, even triple, the tax bill. So that can be a really, really big shock to the system if you haven't allowed for that as well. Something you talked about then, it was interesting, is that with sometimes people get interest only. How do you feel about if you're able to get a property and say it yields 7 or 8% cash on cash, but the lender offers interest only for the first 2 years, whether you need that interest only or not, you can then juice your returns to maybe a 10, 12% cash on cash return. How do you feel about that? Do you think that some people are on the fence whether they should pay down that principal and keep paying down that principal, or is it better to get that cash flow regardless of what the business plan is in terms of value add or not?
So the straight answer is that I feel great about it because I'm used to it. In New Zealand, because of the lack of cash flow, if you like, price to rent ratio, we talked about it, most investors buying assets here with interest-only loans, because if you need to pay principal as well, there's actually going to be what we call negatively geared, meaning that the income is not covering the mortgage, even the loan payment. So I'm very comfortable with that. And my philosophy is that, personal philosophy is that if you can get interest only, you might want to take it, because you can always pay the principal down. You can actually save the difference, if you like, from the cash flow, put it into a capex account or a saving account, and sit on it and see if you'll need to use it towards the property, towards unforeseen event. So, and if you decide in the end of the year that you want to repay principal on it, then you can pay down principal with it. So you can really choose what you want to do. So I like it. But I think it really comes down, if the property is stabilized, then I would, and the lender doesn't want to give interest only or whatever, if they want or not, then, it's not necessarily a necessity, because you don't need to have that help, if you like, of less monthly payment through interest-only payments to allow you to use some of the cash flow, if you like, or the extra cash flow that you're getting from interest-only towards the property. You don't need it because the asset is stabilized. So, you might go into P&I long-term if you want to pay it off. Even better, if it's really good cash flow and it's a smaller property, maybe you'll go for shorter amortization because you want to pay it off. I mean, for example, I got a friend and he bought a fourplex, and he bought it for his daughter when she goes to university. And I think Brandon Turner did it as well, actually. He from Bigger Pockets. He bought a fourplex. He put it on 20 years amortization or 15 years amortization. As long as it's going to pay off by the time his daughter is 15 or something, or 20, when you get ready to go to university, then it fills up the role, if you like, of the purpose of what he's bought this asset to. So sometime, maybe a shorter amortization will be more suitable for your plan, because you want to pay the property off earlier. If you got a plan like that, if you got a newborn and you can buy a fourplex and say this is for her or him, when they go to college, it will be paid off in 15 years. And as long as it pays the bill and it covers all the expenses, you can set and forget. So that's another idea, and I think it's a great idea. I would certainly done it if I could, but in New Zealand it's not possible, and my kids are older now anyway. So, so to answer your question, I think it really depends. One thing is for sure though: do not rely on cash flow to pay for your capital expenditure. If you have a value-add property, if you got an asset which is older, and any asset that you buy, you want to have enough capital reserves to be able to service anything that comes up. Cash flow is a bonus. You need to be well capitalized if you're going to a property which is a value-add property.
Mm-hmm. You want to make sure you have that capital up front, because you never know what's going to go wrong. And if you don't have that, you could be fighting an uphill battle. So that's great. I love how you talk about everything. Thank you so much for sharing everything today, man. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people have learned a lot, People definitely want to reach out to you on mhamastermind.com, right? That's the name of it, if they want to get a hold of it.
MIH, make it happen, mastermind.com.
Yeah.
MIHmastermind.com.
Definitely reach out to Hadar there for sure. It's right, it's right there. It's in the screen. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that information. It's been really fun listening to your story and all the lessons that you've learned that you now pass on to other people. It's really cool. But this is the part of the show that I always like to have a bit of fun with as well. It's where I ask wrestling-themed real estate questions, right? And the first one is the one that usually gets people, but we talked a little bit about wrestling before. You might be good at this. Is what would your wrestling name be?
Well, I was thinking about it, and I came up with something that I think you're gonna like. Razzle Dazzle.
Razzle Dazzle. Okay, the Razzle Dazzle. I like that, from New Zealand. The Razzle Dazzle. So every wrestler has a special move or a signature move. What is your signature move or special move in real estate? What is your biggest strength in real estate?
My biggest strength is asset management, and that was the first name I was thinking, but I thought about being more creative. Marco, my business partner, he calls me Mr. Asset Management, but I thought it's quite boring. But I did remember in the wrestling, when back in the day when I used to look, WWF used to be Mr. IRS with the brief.
Oh yeah.
So I thought about that, but Razzle Dazzle is a little bit more versatile.
Okay, so the Razzle Dazzle, but his special move is being Mr. Asset Management. I like that.
Yeah.
What's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your real estate investing career? Something that's gone wrong.
Oh, it's a good question. Long story short, I went into a 3-site development, which we needed a neighbor consent. I didn't have a deal for a while, and I really wanted to do a ground-up construction. 3 townhouses, and we went into the deal without getting a written upfront written agreement from a neighbor to shift a sewage line that he was basically just draining into. It was on my land, on our land. I did it with a partner, and we thought that he's going to sign it off, no worries, just to shift the sewage line closer to the boundary, because we didn't want to put on the sewage line, otherwise you need to bridge it, and everything was cheaper to just shift it. And he was just stringing us along for like a year without signing the document so we can shift his easement to the new line. And that was really stressful. And in the end, the market changed. When I spoke about earlier, when they introduced the 40% down payments, 60% loan to value. Mm-hmm. So when we decided that we don't want to deal with anything with that project, we just wanted to send the project with the planning, with the consents, we ended up selling it and probably losing, I think, about 30 grand between us or something, which is not, 30 grand between 2 people. It's something, but we learned a lot for it. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was a turning point in my life in a way, because it was a stressful year, and that time really pushed me into being really advocate and strong on practicing meditation. So for me, I take everything with the sign of, everything happens for a reason. And for me, that was the turning point that I had to start practicing mindfulness and meditation to cope with the stress. And since then, I'm doing it nearly daily. And I'm grateful for the lesson. If that's what it cost me, then I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's always a lesson, whatever it is. It's always a lesson. Was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope, getting ready to jump, but you were scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it?
Good question. I'll talk about a recent one. I had that deal under contract, 30% economic occupancy just last year. And I was in Arkansas. I was there for a month and really going through the due diligence. I've done due diligence. And suddenly I'm funding under my own, my over $1 million worth of borrowing on my own, this deal, and very high vacancies and dilapidated kind of, lots of potential, but, kind of rough demographic to change. And I had a little bit of, as we call a blockage, some kind of thinking about the word. It's like, it's not a limiting belief, but it's like a barrier. I felt like I might, want to back off the deal, kind of lack of confidence. Hey, can I do it? Can I not do it? And I then had a chat to my coach, Gino, and I talked to him, and he said, it's a no-brainer deal. It's a life-changing deal. You have to go through it. Don't let this this thought to make you not go to the deal or take your confidence away. So, and then I just said, I'm going to go for it. And I know it's good. I know the numbers. I know the area. I know it's all stacks up. So don't let this feeling, stop you from taking the deal that will be life-changing and really propel me to the next level with that family, which I'm grateful I did. And it's a really good deal.
Yeah. Again, it comes down to who you surround yourself with, right? That's just so important. Well, cool, man. Well, thank you so much for making the time today, man. It's been a phenomenal interview. I've loved every second of it. It's been a really great interview. We talked about it before, but let's mention it again. The MHAmastermind.com. You sign up there. But where else can people find out more about you as well? If they want to get in touch, if they want to find out more about what you're up to, where can they do that?
Yes, so MIH for Make It Happen Mastermind.com. MIHmastermind.com is the main hub. There's a education tab over there with all the free education and courses and various things that we do. Another place you can find me is on YouTube. If you go to the MIH Mastermind YouTube channel, I got a lot of videos there of other podcasts that I did, due diligence, a lot of educational stuff that we do, a lot of boots on the ground videos that to do with multifamily. And if you want to connect with me, feel free to hook me up on LinkedIn as well. I'm there as well. So just my name. And Barry, that was a treat. I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for having me.
No, my pleasure, man. My pleasure. Thank you so much. He's coming with the claw. The Von Erich claw. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day. It's probably about nearly lunchtime in New Zealand, but have a great rest of your day, man. Thank you for making the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.